This one mistake makes dementia symptoms worse, and almost every loving caregiver does it. So when someone that has dementia that we care for says something that isn't true, we want to correct them. We want to be able to offer, information and be able to help them to maybe save face or be able to, to kind of ground them back to reality as to what's really going on. And so in that process, we actually make things much more challenging. So welcome to In-Home Senior Care. My name is Vitaly. I'm so glad you're here. And today we're going to explore this topic about how do you relate to your loved one who has dementia and is saying things, maybe constantly, maybe occasionally, that are not true, and how do you react to that? So let's get into this. The fix is simple, and it lowers the anxiety almost instantly. So do you have a hard time when your loved one with dementia says things that are not true? Maybe they'll say, hey, my sister just came by. It was nice to see her. Maybe they'll say, I'm going to go to the market today, right? And when we know those things aren't true, they're not grounded in reality, that person's not going to go to the market. Do you lovingly correct them to make sure they understand, right? Do you say, hey, your sister wasn't here, you didn't talk to her, you're just imagining, or you're thinking of something else? Do you even say things like, remember I told you that earlier? Do you remember we talked about this? Do you remember? Or if you're honest, you sometimes actually feel frustration, and sometimes it even comes across in your emotions, right? And maybe there's guilt that kind of follows after that, because as we do these corrections and as we remind and say, do you remember, it's clearly not effective, and so it kind of reaches some level of frustration for you. So today's tip is don't correct, redirect. Okay, so we'll get into that. What does that really mean? So someone with dementia does these things, and they say things that in their mind are true, and that's what they're presenting. Correcting the facts usually increases fear, it causes frustration, it causes them to feel like they're doing something wrong, right? And so the simple truth here is that their brain can't process the correction, and so they feel an emotional impact. They feel less than, they feel chastised, they feel like they're doing something wrong, right? So when we correct little children, the hope and the reality is that they retain that information. Now, if you're a parent and you have small kids, sometimes you might feel like, man, I don't know if it's really working. I have to repeat it over and over again, right? That's normal. Like, repetition is something we have to do. But the difference is the young mind is able to absorb that information, and slowly over time, that information becomes their basis for reality and what they're functioning from. Here, because of dementia, their brain's ability to process that information is breaking down. And so that's why it's happening in the first place, because if they could remember, they wouldn't be asking you again. Or if they understood reality, they wouldn't be talking about whatever they just brought up. So correcting memory causes distress because it causes confusion, right? And keep in mind that it's less about the actual words. It is more about your tone, right? Because the words sometimes are confusing. Dementia, as a person progresses, they start to lose their ability to use words, their vocabulary shrinks, but they will retain their ability to read body language, and part of that is our tone of voice, right? So they are very easily able to tell if someone's being kind to them, or if someone's being condescending, or if someone's being mean to them. So that is an important factor here. So they feel shame. They feel like, I must be doing something wrong because somebody is correcting me, maybe my husband, maybe my wife, my daughter. So there's an emotional upset, and there's a fear, because when we feel this confusion, there's fears like what am I doing? I don't know what's happening. Why, right? And all of that adds to the confusion. So you are arguing with a broken memory system. Think about that. So if someone had Parkinson's, you would not ever ask them to control their tremors. You wouldn't say, hey, can you just kind of, remember I told you, like if you focus on it, maybe you would tremor less, right? But with dementia, family caregivers lovingly try to re-educate and try to help the person to just remember I told you. Reframe your own mind. They're not being difficult, they're not trying to be difficult, but their brain is doing the best it can, right? And just like with Parkinson's, their body is doing things that are beyond their control. In this case, their brain is functioning beyond their control, and they can't really contain and control what they're doing. And the more confusing aspect of this is sometimes with dementia, it can kind of ebb and flow. So they can have better days and they can have worse days, to where, again, you may feel like, well, maybe it did work because we talked about this and she had a really good day yesterday, and then you might have a worse day today. So what is redirection? Redirection is joining their emotional journey and then shifting the focus gently, right? So it's meeting them where they are, right? It's knowing that they can't control what their brain is producing and the memories that are coming up that seem very real to them. It is joining that reality and then gently nudging them either away from something that is not appropriate or is not safe, or towards something that's going to be more productive. So that's what it is. What it isn't is lying or giving in or ignoring safety, right? So there's a concept that we kind of think about as a therapeutic fib, right? In other words, the accuracy of the information is less important than the emotional impact of potentially that the truth may have. So an example would be somebody says, well, I miss my sister. I'd love to see her, right? Well, let's say the sister passed away a year ago, right? So you could correct, or you could say, well, you can't because your sister died, right? And that sounds like the right thing to do because we're actually sharing truthful information. But emotionally, for that person who has no awareness at this point that their sister passed away, it is a fresh blow to them to say, what? My sister died? When? I don't remember that, right? And so instead of doing that, we're going to talk about how we can redirect. So remember this phrase, connect first and redirect second, okay? The reason I want to say this is because the connection is going to matter, and the reason is because we're all unique individuals. We're all unique human beings, and we like different things, and we respond to different stimulus differently. So someone may enjoy games, and so games may be a great redirect. Somebody may enjoy food or snacks. That may be a great redirect. But if we know that person, and maybe they like watching a show or watching, a channel on YouTube, that may be a great redirect. But if that's not for them, right, then we need to know that's not going to be enticing for them to go say, hey, let's go watch a show. So connecting first is important because then you understand their story and you understand what motivates them. Maybe it's music, maybe it's dancing, right, those kinds of things. So some common scenarios, instead of that's not true, you could say, hey, let's get a snack, right? And it sounds very insulting because it sounds like we've ignored what they said and we're just saying something else, right? For two people that are having a conversation, if you did that, that sounds insulting because it sounds like you just ignored them and you just changed the subject. But for someone with dementia, the fact that their brain is struggling with being able to bring kind of reality into focus and to stay where things are at, this same process will allow you to easily change the subject with them. And the more important thing, as I said before, is actually the tone of your voice and how you do it, personal touch, a hug, more importantly than actually the words. And sometimes we actually use the physical to kind of shadow or help them move in that direction. So instead of your sister passed away years ago, you could say, you really miss her, huh? Tell me more about her, right? And so you can draw them into a conversation about sister versus going and saying, hey, well, I know you're bringing up your sister, but she passed away. She's no longer around, right? So again, the emotional, we come to their level emotionally. And here's kind of my argument is, what do you win by factually checking every statement and emotionally causing turmoil, right? Let that kind of sink in. So get to their emotional level and use those things to redirect them to something that's more positive. If they're asking for food, and instead of saying you already ate, right, because they don't remember, you could say, would you like something warm to drink? Or you could offer a snack. That might be more appropriate than the full meal, and not actually challenge the fact that they were asking for, for the food. So again, one more time, tone is more important than the actual words, because the tone is going to hit them in here, right? Like when someone says something to us, even without dementia, we are usually more offended by the tone, right? Like if somebody says something to us and we're like, whoa, what's with the tone, right? Like that kind of a response. Well, they may feel that, and they're gonna spin for anxiety and fear and a little bit of frustration of what's wrong with me. Why are you talking to me that way? So keep that in mind.